He's been waiting for 30 years, nearly to the day, for his innocence to be acknowledged as he has claimed. Of course, that's a very long time. Someone to carry this appalling responsibility is incredibly difficult.
In the sun-dappled hills above Cannes, a wealthy widow lay dying in her own cellar, her last act scrawling a name in her own blood. But the words she left didn't make sense. Omar Matouer, a grammatical mistake that would echo across France for decades. Ghislaine Marchal was a life of refinement wrapped inside a lavish villa, a divorcee turned heiress who split her time between Switzerland and the Côte d'Azur. On June 24, 1991, she failed to show up for a lunch appointment, igniting concern. Minutes later, her absence turned into horror when caretakers entered her villa, La Chamade. Inside, the house looked untouched. Breakfast laid out, windows undisturbed, security alarm off. Nothing suggested alarm or intrusion, yet her body was found locked in the cellar. She had been beaten, stabbed repeatedly, and left to bleed in silence. Carnage laid bare where Grace once walked. Above her, on a steel cellar door, were the words, Omar Matouer. The grammar was wrong. It should read, Matouer. An educated woman of her stature would likely never make such an error. The phrase became a riddle, the first whisper that something beneath the surface was off. Investigators quickly focused on one man, Omar Radad, her gardener, Moroccan-born, illiterate, and an immigrant in France. He was easy to target. The bloody message seemed to indict him, yet little else tied him to the crime. No fingerprints, no blood, no clear motive. Still, prosecutors built their case around suspicion and that glaring inscription. They painted him as resentful, a gardener rebuffed when he asked for a wage advance. The defense countered. She had always treated him kindly, leaving no reason for murder. The evidence felt circumstantial, built on word of mouth and cultural strain. In 1994, the jury convicted him. He received an 18-year sentence. Public sentiment was split. Some believed justice had been served, yet others saw bias. Justice turned blind, implicating a foreign worker. The case took on a larger theme: class, prejudice, and power under scrutiny. A partial pardon followed in 1996, granted by President Chirac and influenced by King Hassan II. Omar was released in 1998 after serving just a portion of his sentence. Yet the conviction remained intact. He was free but not exonerated. His name carried guilty in the public record. The phrase Omar Matouer became iconic, investigative shorthand across France. Media, films, books, everyone referenced it, though its meaning remained elusive. The question echoed: did she write it with her last ounce of strength? Or did someone stage it, grammar and all? By the early 2000s, forensic science began to evolve. Cold cases were being revisited in DNA labs, but the Marshall case stalled. No technology could yet unravel the mess. The message remained the only piece of evidence standing tall. Then, in 2015, everything changed. Investigators reopened old evidence with cutting-edge techniques. They discovered male DNA traces from 4 unknown individuals. In a second, incomplete message found near the boiler room. 35 DNA traces emerged.
Know that there were 4 different DNA samples mixed with the blood of the victim, and 2 of them were found on the door of the wine cellar. One of those matched with National Index of Genetic Fingerprints. The other was found 35 times in the place where the writing in blood was located.
The discoveries shook assumptions. Omar's legal team seized the moment. They filed to reopen the case, arguing for a second chance at justice. They leveraged a 2014 law that lowered the bar for retrials. In December 2021, the court agreed to reopen the case. It was a seismic shift, a decade's worth of doubt finally gaining traction. Journalists, activists, and ordinary citizens watched with bated breath. Could this be the end of a long injustice? The reopening brought new scrutiny. Some forensic experts cautioned that the DNA might be contaminated. Old evidence was fragile. Samples had been handled decades earlier. The reliability of these new traces was under intense debate. Excluded voices began to emerge. Ghislaine's niece argued the grammar could be an emotional mistake under duress. Even educated individuals sometimes slip when bleeding out, she said. Handwriting experts remained divided, both affirming and disputing authorship. Alternate theories proliferated. Some hypothesized that the message was staged by someone else in the house. Others suggested a second Omar, someone Marshall knew, but never came forward. Possibilities stacked, turning the case into tangled conjecture. Yet the courts remained cautious. By October 2022, the Board of Review refused a retrial. They cited contamination, uncertainty of DNA origin, and procedural limitations. Justice, perhaps, was still just one door away. But the system wasn't ready to open it. But what happened next was clear. This case would never die. It was a cautionary tale against prejudice masked as justice, a living testament to how language and class shape perception of guilt, a reminder that true truth is often buried deeper than headlines. The refusal for a full retrial did not silence Omar's supporters. They argued that science had uncovered too many anomalies to ignore. A conviction without direct evidence, they said, should never stand unquestioned. This was more than a legal case. It was a test of France's justice system. Omar himself remained composed but persistent. In interviews, he expressed gratitude for freedom, but carried the weight of accusation. He spoke softly, but his message was firm. I did not kill Madame Marshall. To him, each court denial felt like a fresh wound. The case became a mirror to larger issues. France, a country proud of its legal traditions, struggled with old biases. Immigration, language, and class were intertwined in public debate. Many asked whether a man like Omar ever truly had a chance. Journalists dug deeper into the early investigation. They uncovered details that seemed, at best, flawed. The crime scene had been contaminated. Some evidence was destroyed. The pressure to solve a rich woman's murder may have rushed the process. Meanwhile, the phrase, Omar m'a tué, took on a life of its own. It was quoted in classrooms, referenced in art, even used in political cartoons. The grammatical error became symbolic of imperfect justice. A single miswritten verb held the power to divide a nation. Experts continued to challenge the inscription. Could Ghislaine, injured and panicked, have written incorrectly? Some argued trauma could explain the missing accent and wrong gender. Others said it pointed to another hand entirely. The presence of multiple unknown male DNA samples added weight. If others were there, why were they never identified? The samples matched no one in criminal databases. They were ghostly fingerprints of an untold story. As years passed, technology only improved. Calls grew louder to fully sequence all remaining evidence. But the longer time stretched, the more degradation risked accuracy. The case was racing against the clock. The Marshall family stayed mostly private but firm. They held on to their faith in the verdict. For them, every new headline reopened grief. Their loved one's memory was tangled in public debate. Still, public curiosity never waned. Books, documentaries, and podcasts revisited the villa and the cellar door. Viewers were drawn to the mystery, the drama, the unanswered why. True crime audiences dissected each angle as if solving a riddle. The villa itself became part of the lore. La Chamade, once a symbol of comfort, became a frozen scene. The cellar door, the boiler room, the words in blood, unchanged in imagination. Tourists and journalists alike saw it as a haunting stage.
Je suis pas très content avec des Africains et qui me l'a dit déjà. Le combat continue jusqu'au bout. Ça fait dire juste la vérité. La date du jour, je vais passer à la cour d'assises.
For investigators, the early 90s were different times. France had no routine DNA use in courts then. Fingerprinting and witness statements carried more weight. Today's lens revealed gaps they could never fill back then. For Omar, the stain never washed away. Even with freedom, job opportunities were scarce. People recognized his face, his name, his story. Every handshake carried silent judgment. In 2022, when the final refusal came, Omar's lawyer promised to continue. They would seek new appeals, they said, or even European court intervention. The fight, they argued, was for truth, not just one man's record. If the system erred once, it could err again. Legal scholars began citing the case in lectures. They called it a study in circumstantial evidence, a cautionary tale about over-reliance on symbolism, and a reminder that evidence without context can mislead. The mystery endured because it was layered. A victim whose last words may not be hers, a suspect whose guilt was never fully proven, and a door that carried more weight than steel should. Each detail became fuel for speculation. Why was the security system off? Why was the house so neat above, but carnage below? What about the second message, unfinished, in the boiler room? The human element kept it alive. A wealthy, independent woman cut down in her prime. A migrant worker whose life was upended. Families, communities, and nations caught in a story that refused to settle. And then there was the language itself. Tuer, to kill. Written wrong, perhaps on purpose, perhaps by pain. A single word becoming both evidence and question mark. By now, the world had moved on to faster headlines. Yet each anniversary, the case returned to French TV screens. New hosts, new documentaries, same cellar door. The haunting image remained. When the 2021 reopening was announced, Omar reportedly cried. He thought it was final, totally time for the truth. But truth is rarely so simple. The 2022 refusal proved that. Still, his legal team presses on. They speak of exoneration not as a dream, but as a duty. The DNA remains, the records remain, the fight remains. And somewhere, perhaps, so does the real story. The trial's echoes lingered long after Omar left prison. He was technically free, but the conviction still hung over him like a shadow. Newspapers would still print his name with "killer" attached. And each interview began with the same question. Did you do it? The media frenzy never died down. For journalists, this case was a treasure chest of intrigue. A wealthy victim, a foreign worker, a message in blood. It sold papers. Each revisit of the story added another layer to public fascination. Omar's life became a study in limbo. He was neither innocent in the eyes of the law, nor entirely guilty in his own. Employers hesitated, neighbors whispered, strangers stared. His world shrank, but his resolve grew stronger. He gave interviews with quiet dignity. In each, he maintained the same line. I respected Madame Marshal. I could not kill her. He described that day, the shock of arrest, the confusion of trial. Every retelling was both defense and therapy. At the same time, legal teams kept moving. They dug through old files, challenged old conclusions, chased new science. Every discovery of unknown DNA became a rallying cry. Evidence does not lie, they said, and this evidence does not say Omar. For the public, the inscription on the door remained the heart of the mystery. Those 3 words were as famous as any headline. They were studied, debated, even mocked, but they were never fully explained. Some believed it was authentic, written by a dying woman. Others were sure it was staged to frame a suspect. Some even speculated about multiple attackers. Theories branched, tangled, and refused to die. The Marshall family's pain was often overshadowed. They endured press coverage, speculation, and criticism. Yet their grief was real, private, and unending. Their loss was sometimes lost in the noise. In legal circles, the case became a textbook. It was cited in debates about forensic evidence, witness reliability, and bias. Young lawyers studied it as a cautionary tale. Professors used it to teach the limits of language in law. Technology's march only widened the gap between then and now. In 1991, DNA testing was crude and limited. By the 2010s, it could parse a few cells, separate mixed samples, find hidden profiles. But time is cruel to evidence. It degrades, contaminates, fades. When the 2015 analysis revealed traces of unknown men, excitement surged. These were fresh threads to follow, unexplored roads, but they were partial, incomplete, and difficult to contextualize. For courts, uncertainty is poison. It stalls rather than speeds. The reopening of the case in 2021 was a small victory. It showed the system could bend to new science. For Omar, it was a chance at redemption. For Ghislaine's family, it was reopening a wound. Every headline carried the same mix of hope and dread. Supporters called it justice delayed but possible. Skeptics called it pointless, a chase of ghosts. The nation watched as if it were an old drama revived. Yet in October 2022, reality set in again. The High Court refused to grant a retrial. They cited insufficient grounds, contamination, uncertainty. For Omar, it was another door slammed shut. The refusal did not end debate. Some saw it as proof of institutional stubbornness. Others argued it protected judicial integrity. Opinions remained as divided as ever. For Omar, the fight turned international. His lawyers hinted at appeals to European human rights courts. They wanted to clear his name beyond France's borders. Justice, they said, should not have nationality. Meanwhile, pilot documentaries kept the story alive. Podcasts, films, articles, all dissected the case. Some painted Omar as victim, others as criminal. But each added to the legend of La Chamade. In 2023, Omar was seen rarely, preferring privacy. Yet each media request was a reminder. He could never escape this story. Friends said he carried quiet sadness, but little bitterness. Time had hardened him into patience. By now, the Marshall case was more than an old crime. It was a symbol. It reflected trust and doubt, justice and error, privilege and prejudice. For the public, it wasn't just about guilt or innocence. It was about the system itself. What happens when language, class, and science collide in a courtroom? The door inscription had become iconic. Omar Matouer appeared in books, essays, even graffiti. It was studied by linguists, psychologists, and forensic experts. Each group saw it differently. Each offered new theories. Some handwriting analysts swore the strokes matched Ghislaine's known samples. Others argued stress could alter style but not grammar. The missing accent, the wrong gendered verb, too many anomalies. Could someone else have written it, knowing it would incriminate Omar? These questions refused to fade. Every new show or article reopened debate. Theories flourished. An unknown lover, a botched robbery, a staged scene. But none came with the evidence needed to rewrite the verdict. For Omar's supporters, the unknown DNA profiles were crucial. To them, they were invisible witnesses, proof that someone else was there. Why didn't the courts demand deeper analysis? They asked, was the system afraid of overturning its own judgment? In interviews, Omar's lawyers sounded more determined than ever. They spoke of European courts, of international scrutiny. They framed Omar's case as a human rights issue, a man labeled a killer without a complete, uncontested proof. But time was not kind. As years passed, key players aged, memories blurred, evidence decayed. The villa changed hands. The cellar was just another room now. But for those involved, it was frozen in 1991. The Marshall family faced their own struggle. They had lost a beloved daughter, aunt, friend. They endured speculation about her private life, about motives and suspects. It was painful, and they seldom spoke publicly. Yet when asked, they stood by the conviction. To them, justice had been served in 1994. They trusted the jury, the process, the weight of that blood-stained door. It was the only way to find closure. For some, the case exposed cultural divides. Omar, a Moroccan worker, was judged by a largely French jury. His language skills were limited, his background modest. Was he an easy scapegoat or a guilty man fairly tried? The phrase Omar Matour kept stirring debate even in classrooms. Students argued grammar versus psychology, evidence versus intuition. What does a dying hand write? What mistakes can trauma cause? The question was both simple and impossible. Meanwhile, technology marched on. Familial DNA, forensic genealogy, new sequencing, all changed crime solving. But older cases faced barriers, degraded samples, legal hurdles, missing context. Each innovation brought hope, but not guarantees. In 2021, the reopening request lit a brief flame. It was based on these new tools, on those unknown DNA samples. But the court's refusal reminded everyone, science is only part of justice. Judges weigh more than molecules. They weigh finality and faith. The refusal left Omar in a strange space. He was a man free but unfreed. He walked streets but carried chains of doubt. A name once private, now forever public. Yet the case shaped his life in unexpected ways. He became a quiet symbol for legal reform. Advocates for the wrongfully convicted cited his name. Some called him unlucky. Others called him resilient. For true crime enthusiasts, the Marshall case remains haunting. A perfect storm of wealth, violence, language, and suspicion. It asks hard questions. How do we know truth? How do we prove it? And can a verdict ever be beyond doubt? The Villa La Chamade still exists, though altered. But in the mind's eye, it is forever that June day. The sunlit south of France, the quiet estate, the cellar's dark secret, blood on the door, a sentence in red, a life ended. Today, when people hear the name, they rarely think of Ghislaine's full story. They think of a phrase, a man's face, a legal saga, the victim, the accused, the door. They are locked together forever. It is a chain of words stronger than steel, and so the questions linger, unanswered. Could new science one day speak for the silent? Could another case, another breakthrough, unravel the mystery? Or will the truth remain sealed behind that cellar door?